Hello and welcome. Today I'm going to be testing out my new watercolor, Opera Rose. I'll start off by swatching it, add it to my swatch sheet, and then I'll be painting a watercolor that features it. So what is Opera Rose? How is it so bright? It's actually quite interesting because you can see it's a beautiful color. It's almost too beautiful to be real. But the sad thing is that beauty is not made to last. Opera Rose is what they call a fugitive color. That means that it will fade with time. There's nothing you can do to stop it. So you can use it, but it will only be temporary. Opera Rose is one of many such fugitive colors, and there are quite a few very common colors that I was unaware of before I started researching for this video that are fugitive colors. And this is a problem that has plagued painters going back centuries. Some of the great masters used fugitive colors without knowing it, or because they had better things to worry about and they didn't know that we would be looking at their paintings hundreds of years in the future. One such example is Van Gogh. Okay, I'm going to speed things up here while I just sketch my underpainting. I'm using a reference from Freepik because despite the name, I have a paid subscription there, and so I feel morally more comfortable using that as a reference since I'm posting this online. When I'm working in my sketchbook, I use Pinterest for inspiration all the time. Oh, just a quick pause here to talk about this eraser. So it's by Tombow. It's supposed to like catch all of those little bits and pieces that get in the way of your paint when you're erasing pencil, but it's not doing a very good job. Anyway, where was I? Fugitive colors, yes. So Van Gogh was one of the people who used fugitive colors, and so the paintings that we are so familiar with, like his Jar of Roses, they were actually originally completely different colors. So the question then is, why would I buy a color that I knew would not last, that would fade away over time? And the answer is that this is going to be a little bit of a rant, but it's okay to do things just for fun, like uploading this video. Excuse the hyper speed there, I just wanted to get the undercoating down. It's very boring, so I sped it up a lot. I promise I don't move that fast in real life. I think it's 8 times speed. Yes, so the reason I'm doing this video and the reason that I bought the paint are the same. It's for fun. I enjoy improving my art. And I think it's okay to just do something because you enjoy it, not because you feel like it's going to become your career, or you're going to need to make money out of it, or you need to become perfect at it. I'm definitely prone to perfectionism, and it's something that I'm trying to fight in my daily life, because what I've discovered is that the adage, better done than perfect, is so true. I feel like I've missed out on so much because I felt like I couldn't do it perfectly. And that's across so many things, from sport, when I was teased as a kid for not being able to do it properly, and so I started to resent it. Little did I know that I was just ADHD and I just needed to practice. And it's the same with art. You know, I practice so that I can get better, so that I can get closer to the vision I have in my head. I'm constantly trying to build my skills, and sometimes I forget that it's all for me. So I'm uploading this video, and I hope that you watch it and that you enjoy it, even though it's not perfect, and I'm aware that I'm very new to making videos, and I don't have a good setup, I don't have great lighting. You'll see the sun slowly set on the scene as it progresses, because I think it took about 3 hours to paint. But you know what? I enjoy it. And I think that when you enjoy something, your love for it comes through. At least that's what I'm hoping you'll get out of this, is how much I really enjoy this hobby. And I feel like sharing it with you on YouTube is a way that I'm going to do it more. it's a reason to put in the time and the effort. So here I'm building up the colors on the water. So the thing about watercolor that I have a digital art background, so this is something that I'm still getting used to, is the idea that I can work in layers, but I have to go from light to dark. So if you don't leave the bits that you want to be white right at the beginning, those are not going to be white with watercolor. So you'll see just now that I get, that's a very South African saying, just now, but you'll see here that I got out my gouache colors. So if you don't know, gouache is very similar to watercolor. It's watercolor but opaque. And the other difference is that it reactivates. So it is also a challenge for me because I like to work in layers. While I can go from dark to light with gouache, if I'm doing multiple layers of gouache, it can get quite muddy because it reactivates the layer below. So I've actually just ordered some acrylic wash, which is supposed to be the best of both worlds. It sits like stable, you can't reactivate it like acrylic, but it has the kind of look and feel of gouache, and you can use it with watercolors. And I'm just zooming in a little bit on the detail here. So what I'm doing is I'm actually using this new Kolinsky, my first ever Kolinsky brush, to add little dabs of color for leaves. And it's a technique that I quite enjoy. It gives a kind of pointillist effect. But you'll see that the challenge here was trying to add the background, the dark background behind the trees, without it looking like they were on separate planes. And that is where I do kind of fall back on gouache, because I know that I can, and you'll see me later, I can add gouache on top of watercolor, and then it doesn't reactivate the watercolor if the watercolor's dry. And yeah, they work really well together. You can see there the little eraser bits that were supposed to be picked up by the eraser getting in the way, but it's okay, it's just for fun. As Bob Ross says, happy little accidents, right? They can add some texture, a little bit of interest to the piece. So you'll see I keep layering over and over and over on the water, and that's intentional because I'm trying to build up that transparency. That's the other great thing about watercolors, is that transparency. You can see the multiple layers through the one. You can see it here in the close-up, all of the different layers. You can see right through. Yeah, still trying to improve that technique, but like that's one of my favorite things about painting in watercolor, is actually painting water. But I think that I pushed it to the point where the paper was starting to complain here. Now I'm just adding the first reflections. Speed up again. Yeah, I'm using Dala Rowley hot pressed paper, so it's super smooth. I love this paper, but it's definitely not one of the most expensive papers out there. So it does very well with multiple layers to a point, and it's to a much further point than a lot of similarly priced papers. So I do recommend it for beginners or hobbyists like me, because I find that if I have really expensive papers, I just don't use them. I have no project feels special enough. And here I'm just dabbing in some of those leaves again. Slightly bigger brush. That's very relaxing. Just trying to keep it loose and not too uniform. And also adding some like hard edges and soft edges, because I tend to be a soft edge person. I struggle with architecture or anything that requires a hard edge, which is not ideal because good art is a mixture of both. Here in the background, I'm using a lot of cool colors in that middle bit there. And now for the start of the show, there is Opera Rose. You can see it's a really beautiful, vibrant color. It just pops against the green. So the other interesting fact about Opera Rose that I discovered from a YouTuber called The Spin Doctor, and I'll link to his video in the description, is that it has the exact same pigment as magenta. So that pigment, which is called quinacridone, is used in a number of different paints, but what's interesting here is that it is the only pigment that is used. So how do two paints that have only one pigment and it's the same pigment, magenta and Opera Rose, look so different? And the answer is that when it was first manufactured in the 50s, the manufacturers were quite sneaky, and in order to give it that vibrance, they snuck in some fluorescence, but they didn't put it into the pigment, they put it into the binder. So because it was in the binder, not the pigment, they didn't have to declare it, and it could remain a secret. I thought that was very interesting. So it's not a pigment, it's a dye, a fluorescent dye, and that's why Opera Rose is so bright. Magenta is bright, but Opera Rose is next level, and that's because it actually is a little bit fluorescent. You can really see it there against the green. Unfortunately, it's what I was talking about, like if I was a real watercolor artist, I should have masked out that area. I should have planned exactly where that tree would go, masked it out so that you didn't have that green behind it, but you'll see that I end up visiting my friend Gouache, fixing it that way. Just adding in those little hints of branches at the moment. Again, so much easier in gouache because I could just draw the tree and paint over it. But I really wanted to try practice some watercolor technique this time. So I'm adding this little tree here. It was in the reference picture, but it's supposed to kind of mark the third line and divide the painting into thirds. But I'm not sure in retrospect that it was a good idea to add it. It calls too much attention to itself when the focal point is supposed to be the pink tree. So here's the gouache. You can see that I am layering it over that tree to try and make it less obvious, so also darkening the background, and I'm adding more blue tones. Even though I'm using ochre, I'm actually using ochre mixed with blue, an ultramarine blue. just to try to tone it down and help it recede, because cool colors recede into the background. It's always tempting for me to add too much detail in the background, when what I really want is that atmospheric effect of it kind of fading back. And here's the white gouache. Now what I'm doing is I'm adding my Opera Rose to the white gouache, which is something that I've been meaning to try. It was one of the things that I had in mind when I bought the Opera Rose, because I didn't have a nice pink wash. So you can see it's a beautiful pink color. And now I'm just layering it over to kind of hide that green that's lurking behind the plant. Another thing about gouache, which isn't supposed to be the same in the acrylic gouache that I've ordered, is that it often dries a different color from the color you put down, which is very frustrating. And in this particular set, it often dries darker. So I am relying a lot on my swatch sheets, which you can see off to the side there, for what the colors will actually look like. But it's still sometimes difficult to predict in context. So again, I'm just adding the bluey green and the blue just to try and create some depth. I decided I didn't like the bridge. I'm just going to start again. And doing the Bob Ross trick of just pushing the color up to create the hint of those columns. And now again, just those hard lines that I was talking about, just trying to get some man-made constructive lines there to contrast with the nature. And a little ducky. There was a ducky in the reference. Not great at drawing animals or painting animals, but I had to include it. It's just the lines leading towards that pink tree, and he was one of the little lines, or she. I don't know the gender of the duck. And then a final layer, I think this is the final layer, over the water. And you can see the paper there just starting to give up. The paper's just saying no more, please. So we're done. And now the satisfying part. Highly recommend painter's tape, by the way. Used to use washi tape, but I'm a convert. This stuff is amazing. Look at that clean line. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to upload something new soon. Let me know in the comments what you think of Fugitive paints, and if you would use them yourself. This is how it came out. I'm happy. It's not perfect, but it doesn't have to be. Chat soon. Bye.